There's something they don't tell you about power. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout. The most powerful people in your life are probably the ones who say the least, and you never even notice. You were taught the opposite. Talk more. Speak up. Share your truth. Defend yourself. Explain yourself. The world rewards those who are loud, visible, and constantly heard. So you spent years learning to be heard. You crafted your words. You perfected your argument. You became skilled at talking your way through conflict, proving your point, making sure everyone knew exactly who you are. And somewhere along that journey, you lost something critical. You lost the power that comes from not saying a word. Carl Jung understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives missing. He saw that every single word you speak is a choice to reveal yourself. And most people reveal far too much, to the wrong people, at the wrong time. We live as if words are free. They're not. Every word you speak is a currency you spend, and most of us are bankrupt because we've never learned to stop spending. Think about the last argument you had with someone. You were right, weren't you? You had all the logic, all the evidence, everything perfectly lined up. So you spoke, you explained, you defended, and they still didn't understand. They still disagreed, and you walked away feeling drained, frustrated, invisible. This is what happens when you believe that words have the power to change minds. They don't. Words are like arrows fired into the dark. Most of them miss. Some hit, but bounce off. And the few that land only wound. They never transform. But silence, true silence, operates on a completely different frequency. Jung spent decades observing the human psyche, and he noticed a pattern that terrifies most people once they understand it. The words you speak are not actually, they are performance, they are masks, they are your attempt to control how the world perceives. Every sentence is a negotiation. Every explanation is you trying to win something. Every defense is you trying to convince someone that you matter, that you're right, that you're worthy. And the more you speak, the more desperate you appear, even if you don't realize. Desperation doesn't announce itself with a megaphone. It announces itself through an inability to be silent. The person who can sit in a room and not fill the silence with words has already won something. They've won the right to their own internal world. They've won protection. They've won mystery. And in a world obsessed with transparency, mystery is the rarest form of power. This is what Jung was pointing toward when he spoke about the shadow self, about the parts of us that remain hidden and unconscious. Most people live terrified of their shadow, so they talk, they confess, they over-explain. They tell people their dreams and fears and insecurities, hoping that if they just expose themselves enough, they'll finally be accepted. It's the opposite of what should happen. Silence protects your shadow. Silence keeps the powerful parts of you away from people who would use them against you. You know people like this, not many, but a few. The quiet person at the party who you can't quite read. The colleague who barely speaks in meetings, but when they do, everyone listens. The person who doesn't need to tell you about their strength because it radiates from them naturally. They're not mysterious because they're being fake. They're mysterious because they understand something. Not everything needs to be known. Not everything deserves an audience. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think silence is weakness. They think silence means you have nothing to say, nothing to offer, nothing to defend. So they fill the void with words, convinced that volume equals value. But Jung saw something different. He saw that the most integrated, psychologically mature people he met were the ones who had learned to contain themselves. They had learned that power doesn't broadcast. It doesn't announce. It's simply it. Think about what happens when you tell people about your plans, your goals, your dream. You feel lighter, don't you? You feel like you've made them real by speaking them into existence. What you don't realize is that you've also diluted. You've distributed your energy into the world, expecting others to validate them, to help you carry them, to make them real. But the moment someone questions them, doubts them, or even just doesn't react the way you hope, those goals suddenly feel less real to you than they did before. This is the theft that happens through speech. You steal your own power every time you ask for permission through word. The people who build empires, who transform their lives, who actually accomplish the things everyone else just talks about, they have a secret. They don't broadcast. They execute in silence. They don't need your validation before they start. They don't need your permission. They don't even need your belief. They move quietly, and by the time you notice them, they're already far ahead. But there's something darker here, something Jung would want you to understand. Not all silence is power. There's a silence that is imprisonment. There's a silence that comes from fear, from shame, from the belief that your voice doesn't matter. That's not the silence we're talking about. The silence that is your greatest weapon comes from knowing that your voice has value, and therefore you choose carefully where you spend it. It comes from confidence, not doubt. It comes from clarity, not confusion. It comes from integration, not fragmentation. Jung believed that we contain multitude. Within each of us are aspects we show the world and aspects we hide. The problem most people face is that they haven't integrated these parts. So they leap. They contradict themselves. They say one thing and feel another. They're split. And because they're split internally, they're constantly trying to convince the external world that they're whole. They talk to prove it. They speak to convince. They fill silence because silence forces them to face the fact that they're not actually integrated. But silence forces integration. When you stop performing for an audience, even the internal audience in your head, something shifts. You start to notice what you actually think versus what you think you're supposed to think. You start to distinguish between your authentic desires and the desires you've been taught to have. You start, slowly, to become whole. And whole people don't need to convince anyone of anything. Their presence does the work. This is Jung's real teaching hidden inside the title about silence. He wasn't advocating for you to become mute, to withdraw from the world, to disappear. He was telling you that power comes from knowing the difference between what deserves your words and what deserves your presence. Some moments demand speech, some demand action, but most moments, most conversations, most conflicts demand nothing from you except the strength to be still. The greatest weapon is the one you never have to use. It sits there, hidden, known only to you, and its mere existence changes how people treat you. They sense it. They don't know what it is, but they know something is different about you. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not desperate to be understood. You're simply here, simply present, simply knowing your own worth without needing to announce it. This is why silence is your greatest weapon. Not because words are bad, not because communication is wrong, but because in a world drowning in noise, the ability to be quiet is the rarest and most valuable skill you can develop. It protects your energy. It preserves your power. It keeps your authenticity intact. It forces you to know yourself deeply enough that you don't need external validation. It makes you dangerous in the way that truly powerful people are dangerous, not through aggression, but through quiet certainty. Start noticing how much you speak because you're afraid of what silence would reveal. Start noticing how many words you use to control how people perceive you. Start noticing the moments when you could simply listen, could simply observe, could simply be, but instead you choose to speak. These are the moments where you're giving away pieces of yourself that you'll never get back. Your greatest weapon isn't waiting to be discovered. It's waiting to be practiced. It's the one thing you already possess, but have been trained to avoid. Master it, and watch how everything changes. Not because the world will suddenly understand you, but because you'll finally understand yourself. And that's when real power begins.